Thank you guys for being here today. It's a lovely day. Paul Blackburn is our guest coach today, so I'm super excited to have you here today, Paul. We are going to be talking about some great information when it comes to negotiations. But first, I would love to celebrate some of our July successes from some of you who have submitted feedback to me. Thank you so much. I love hearing how you're all doing, good or bad. Please continue giving us the feedback throughout the year. Your feedback actually helps Amy and I tweak the program for the next year. So please keep that feedback coming. So our first agent that I would like to give a shout out to is Bashti Ara. Hopefully I'm saying this right. Araya from our Evanston office. Bashti says, Accelerate helps me stay consistent and hyper-focused on my business. I am also more confident asking for business and articulating my value. I love that, Bashti. I hope you have taken our Getting What You're Worth workshop. I bet you have, because that helps articulate you, helps you articulate your value proposition as well. So I love to hear that Accelerate is helping you stay focused and committed. So thank you for submitting that feedback. Then we have Mr. Richard O'Dwyer from our Evanston office as well. Richard says, Accelerate has helped me with the weekly Wednesday morning meetings, especially the people on our team who have been chugging along and sharing their successes. And of course, these special guest interviews with Angela are always informative and spark my ideas for upping my game. Well, thank you so much, Richard, for that feedback. I love that you're loving it and you're being inspired on your Wednesday mornings. And I love that your team members are chugging along. Sometimes it feels like that, right? Like all we're doing is chugging along. But that's awesome. And I love that you're having a good success with your team as well. So thanks for that feedback. And then we have Amy Garvey from our Winnetka office, who said she was talking with her team on a pricing strategy for a sale listing. She changed her pricing strategy and she got 4 offers. So isn't that amazing news, Amy? That's awesome. And I love when I get feedback like this because it just proves the importance and the value behind your small accountability groups. And I also want to throw this out there that I know that a lot of you have been struggling with the summertime. I've gotten a lot of feedback and a lot of questions, kind of feeling a little bit of failure because maybe we have been enjoying summer a bit much and not focusing as much on business as we feel we should have. And I'm just here to say to you guys that that is okay. Paul and I were just talking about this. Everybody pretty much gets derailed in the summer. We have a lot going on. If you have kids home, kids coming and going, maybe you're spending more time on your recreational activities. Paul, what are you doing this afternoon?
I may or may not be on the golf course. So,
so we're here to say it's okay if you've been feeling like you haven't been super focused this summer. I will say I felt the same way, guys. I have 3 kids. They're, younger and they keep me going and there's been a lot going on. And I've also been throwing a lot of pool parties. And so I just want to say that it's okay that you're in that space. But I think the key is to recognize it, lean into it, and now come up with a plan for what we're going to do to get back on track. So if you are a team lead, please inspire your team members to get back on track for the fall market. There's a lot of opportunity and a lot of business to be had, and it's a great time to get ourselves organized. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Time to get back in and jump in the game. So we are going to talk about negotiations today. And I love having a managing broker on this webinar in particular, because they are boots on the ground. Every day they are giving advice and they are trying to help agents through specific situations in their business when it comes to negotiations. So I invited Paul Blackburn here today, who is our Vice President of Brokerage Services and designated managing broker for 2 of our amazing city offices, Goose Island and North Center. There's a lot of interesting things about Paul, but a couple things here is that he's been licensed since 2007, basically since he's been a baby, and he's held a managing broker position since 2020. Like I said, he currently manages our Goose and North Center offices. He founded a development company in college that worked on single family rehabs and condo conversions in Chicago and its suburbs, which is really interesting. Some of my favorite fun facts about Paul is that he loves to cook. I love to follow you on Facebook, Paul, when you do your like little cooking sessions. I know Paul also really loves wine and cocktails. And
Just a
he's
little
not
bit,
afraid.
right? Just a little bit.
Yeah, and he's not afraid to admit it. And if you're lucky, maybe he'll give us a little view of his bar. And he also loves to travel the world, preferably on a cruise ship. So I know he loves cruising as well. So welcome, Paul. I know I gave a lot of information about you. Do you want to say anything? Give any details about yourself?
Um, let's see. The other thing to know is I've been with App Property since 2010. So I have been here for 13 years. So that's always just like a fun little added tidbit. When I first joined the company, my goodness, I think we had 700 and something brokers. We're even a little bit less than that. So it's cool to look back just to see how we've grown. But everything you said about me is correct. I do drink a little too much, and I love my cruises. So we're actually going on cruise number 29 in December.
Oh my gosh, where are you going?
So we'll just be in the Caribbean. So Key
Oh, cool.
West, St. Thomas, St. Martin, and I forgot which other ones. So
Very cool. So follow Paul on Facebook. Are you on Instagram too, Paul?
I am on Instagram, yes.
Yeah, so yeah, he's really fun to follow. He's always doing really interesting things. Like I kind of like live vicariously through him. Um, so thank you for being here today. I'm super excited. So let's get right into it. I think Paul's going to
Yep.
have a lot of good insight for us on how to deal with some specific situations when it comes to sellers and buyers. So I wanted to start off the webinar just by asking a couple questions to warm us up to your tips and tricks on when it comes to negotiations. So give us an idea of some high level tips that you give agents for how to be a successful negotiator, and also maybe also how they can appropriately level set with clients.
Sure. So let's start with the tips on negotiation. I think walking into any negotiation, regardless of what it is, you have to understand what your goal is, right? So, what is that priority? Because when you get in the middle of a negotiation, it's easy to kind of get sidetracked with things. So, I think number one, you have to understand what that goal is. Um, Being honest. This seems like something that's just really, really basic. But sometimes in negotiations, we tend to want to posture a little bit, maybe bend the truth just to kind of get things in our favor. And I can tell you, it will come back to bite you. So you really want to make sure that you are truly being honest in any of the negotiations that you are doing. Um, the other thing too is confidence, the way you actually deliver what you're saying, you have to be believable, right? And if you don't believe in what you're selling, if you don't believe in how you're negotiating, guess what? That other side ain't going to believe it as well. And then the last thing I think is like really important given the current market that we're in, and we're dealing with a lot of multiple offers, right? You have to be likable. Like if you're not likable, maybe the best thing to do is just get out of sales and do something else, right? So you just have to be likable in the transaction. The other broker on the other side is going to want to be working with somebody who is easy to do business with, who is just truly genuine and truly likable. That actually goes a lot farther than you might think.
I love that. I really love that, especially in a market like this, right? Like it's tough and people don't want to work with unkind people. So it would probably behoove you and your clients to kind of be a nice guy, right? I mean, not a pushover, but just be,
No.
fun to work with. And I love, the honesty part of it. And I also want to throw in there, and I think we talked about this during our last presentation when Candace was on with us, that you're not going to be a successful negotiator right out of the gates, right? This is going to be finesse. This is going to take time. This is going to take practice. Lean into it. Don't be afraid to ask for help, right, Paul? Like especially asking your
Yep.
managing broker. If you find yourself in a situation where you just don't see a way out, your managing broker is great to lean into.
Yeah, exactly. I love the word you use, finesse, because that's really true in negotiations, because we're dealing with a lot of different personalities, and each negotiation is going to be different. There really is no one size fits all. It really is one size fits one. Each negotiation is going to be a little bit different given the property, given the clients, given the personalities that you're dealing with. But here's the thing: the more you do it, the better you are going to become at it. So if you fail at something and something doesn't work out or something goes a little bit sideways, just take a step back, evaluate kind of what went wrong, learn from it, and you will definitely be better at that next time.
Yeah, you only get better by failing, right?
Correct.
Like it's the only way you're
Yep.
going to grow is by failing and making mistakes. So kind of look at it from that perspective. I tell my kids this all the time when I'm not yelling at them. But just look at it like, I have to make mistakes to grow and to get better, and that's how I'm going to learn. So I like looking, especially at the topic of negotiations, because people get really uncomfortable with it.
Hmm.
Um, because it's not so black and white, and you do finesse it over time, but just look at it like a learning experience. Every time you go into a negotiation, it is time for you to grow and learn and get better. So I would love to go through some scenarios with you, Paul, that I think are indicative of our current market. And
Sure.
I looked at some of these questions that we used last year in Accelerate, and last year it was more of a newer market, and me and Paul were laughing because these same scenarios still ring true a year later, which is interesting. So
Yep.
let's talk through some of these, and I'm going to throw a scenario at you, and I'd love for you to kind of give it a rebuttal. Okay.
Sure. Before we do that, though, you did mention level setting, and I don't think I touched on
Oh,
level
yeah.
setting.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So, level setting, extremely, extremely important to do that from the very onset of the relationship with your client. And I think sometimes the problem that we have, and I hear this a lot of times from both brand new brokers and brokers who have been in the business for a long time, they may make the comment and say, we'll just let the client make the mistake. They're not listening to me right now. They'll learn from that mistake and then we'll be okay. And that's really not the best way to go ahead and level set and approach something with a client. You don't want to treat them like a 5-year-old, right? Where it's like, don't touch that hot stove, don't touch that hot stove. And then you just let them do it so they learn on their own and then they don't do it again. Doesn't work with clients, because what's going to happen is the client is going to be coming back and looking at you and is going to be asking you, hey, why didn't you stop me from making that mistake? Or if you then say, that really wasn't the best way, we should have done this, they're going to ask you, well, why did you not tell me that before? So I think to level set, we have a very honest conversation with the client at the beginning. And we say, look, it's my job to guide you through this process so you are successful at reaching your goals. And sometimes that's going to mean I have to say things that you don't want to hear, but that you need to hear. But you need to realize that we are working through this together to get to that same place, that same common goal. But I'm telling you, have that conversation from the very, very beginning. It's going to make every other conversation with your clients so much easier.
I love that. Positioning yourself as the leader, because you're the leader in the whole experience and the whole transaction. So I love doing that right out of the gate and setting those expectations right away. And I think like being honest like that, I think people appreciate that too. Like leaning
Completely.
into it. Like sometimes I'm going to deliver news that you're not going to like to hear. It's so much better to hear that up front than dealing with it, when you're in the middle of a situation and then they're like super
Mm-hmm.
annoyed and they're like, why didn't you warn me? So I love that.
Yep.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, great. I'm going to throw some scenarios at you, and just if you
Cool.
could share your words of wisdom and insight with us on how to deal with these situations, that would be amazing.
Well, let's have
So
some fun.
first, I am a potential seller, and I am telling you, Paul, that I am afraid that if I sell right now, there is going to be nothing for me to buy and I will have nowhere to go. So I'm going to wait to sell. What would you say?
So, at the end of the day, moving is a very, very stressful situation. And I completely understand that. And you're right, it's even more stressful when you don't know where you're going. But what we have to make sure that we do is we focus on the goal, right? And that goal is to get you into the new home. And in order to do that, we have to put you in the best possible position to succeed. And that might mean selling your home now so you are able to be in a fantastic position to win the bid on that next home. And like I said, I do understand that this is a very stressful time, and we can look at some options. We can look at the options of perhaps some short-term housing in the interim until you find exactly what you want. Or we can even look at perhaps a lease back or something along those lines to keep you in the home longer, even after closing, until you find the home that you really want and that you're looking for. But here's what I do know, is I do know right now that there are a lot of buyers out there in very strong positions. They're either cash or they don't have a home sale contingency. So in order for us to get you to that goal, we just need to make sure we put you in the same strong position.
Love it. Who loved that? Throw that in the chat. I think you hit on so many good points. I love that you gave that person options, right? You said, hey, I love that you leaned into the reality of the situation, number one.
Exactly.
And then I love that you gave them options, right? Hey, here's some things that you can think about and how we can get through this roadblock. I love that. Does anyone have any questions on that situation? Just throw it in the chat because we can ask Paul any questions that you may have. Another thing that go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you use the term we, like whenever you're saying things like along this line, hey, here's what we can do. You want to show that you are in it with your client and they're just not on an island alone. So I always love using the term we when discussing these kinds of options.
Yeah, I love that. So you're in it to win it with them, Another thing that I think that would be really good is to maybe storytell, right? You could bring up a past client who maybe was in a similar situation and talk about their situation, their particular situation, and how they had a similar roadblock and how you got them past the roadblock and how successful it was and how happy they are now. So storytelling might be a good thing to do too.
That's a fantastic idea. And here's the thing, like with the when you tell a story, you're going to hit them right here. They're going to feel it, right? So you're going to hit them with the emotions, and guaranteed they may forget some of the advice that you give them. They will remember the story. So if you have a fantastic story, use it.
Love it. All right. Any questions on that one before we move on? All right. So our next one, which I'm sure nobody ever deals with, a current seller that wants to list their property at an unreasonable price due to the seller's market we've been in over the past few years.
That never happens. What are you talking about, Angela? Nobody. All right, so there's a couple of different ways you can respond to this, but I'll give you one that I've actually been talking with, I've been using recently with a lot of my brokers. So that's basically this right here, right? Completely understand we are definitely in a seller's market. So I totally get the fact that you want to go ahead and push the price. But here's the one thing to understand. The market is really hot right now. And because of that, market time is more important than ever. The buyers that are currently out there are losing out in multiple offer scenarios. They're seeing properties go under contract in 1 day, 2 day, or in less than a week. If we overprice the property and it sits around and languishes for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or even longer, the buyers are definitely going to think there's something wrong with the property. They're definitely going to think that we are desperate. And 9 times out of 10, the offers that we are going to receive are going to be lower than if we had just priced the property correctly to begin with. That's the one thing I love to go into is really the market time, right? Because the sellers out there who are trying to overprice, they realize that the market is hot. So we get it. Like, we want to acknowledge that. At the same time, because the market is so hot and things are moving so quickly, market time now is more important than ever before. Something that languishes for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the buyers are going to think something's wrong because everything else they saw went under contract like this, right? So that's what I would use in this exact market as a tool to go ahead and try and get those sellers down.
I love that. And then leaning into the data, right? Like setting realistic expectations. Look, these are what the comps show, and kind of making them understand that listing at an unreasonably high price, they're just not going to sell for that. So use your data to prove, the right way to go when it comes to pricing. Does anyone
the other option? Oh, sorry.
Just throw them in the chat, you guys, if you have any other questions.
So the other option I would say on that too is again, going back to giving them options. You can say, hey, we can do this, but here's the potential, issue that we may have. Or it could be something as simple as, hey, we can list at 850, even though the data is showing 800, but here's what we need to do. We need to make sure that if we are not under contract within 2 weeks, we make a price adjustment down to 800. And you want to get that buy-in then, as opposed to try to get that buy-in 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later. It's going to make that conversation so much easier for you all.
Yeah, I like giving the options too, right? Like if they're really not budging, at least having some kind of an agreement up front that says, hey, if we don't get any offers, in second showings in the first 10 days, then here's the date. We're lowering it to this
Here's what
price
we're
and
gonna
we're all agreeing right now. What are your thoughts though, Paul, on Lisa says, here is the response to that. Let's just try it. What are your thoughts, Paul, on because the market is pretty good for sellers right now?
Sure.
What are your thoughts on taking an overpriced listing?
I
Are
think it
you
depends
more,
on how overpriced. And so a good way to kind of explain that is, are you overpricing it in such a way that the buyers walking through that property have a totally different set of expectations? So let's say you think the property should be priced around 750 or 775, and your seller wants to try for 800. That's probably okay. Your average buyer might be looking up to 800,000, and you can get some buy-in at the time of the listing agreement to say, hey, if we're not under contract in 2 weeks, we're going to go ahead and we're going to make that price adjustment. But if you have a seller that wants to list at 850 and it should be priced at 750, the buyers walking through that property probably have a $900,000 budget or $1 million budget. Their set of expectations are going to be completely different. So I really think it really matters on how overpriced the actual property is. And if you are going to go ahead and try it and test the market, you need to have a game plan for when it doesn't work. And you need to have that game plan set up with the seller at the very beginning. Because if you don't, that seller is probably going to unfortunately end up blaming us, right? When that property doesn't sell and say, well, why did you not tell me that?
yeah, love that. Agree with proactively setting up the reduction. Yeah, Lisa, I agree to that too. And I think there's a lot of agents desperate for business right now and desperate to
Desperate for
get listings
listings.
out there, right?
Yeah.
Like we're like, oh God, please. So I feel like there's probably a lot of agents maybe taking those listings at unrealistic prices. But like Paul said, having that conversation up front about what the plan is when it doesn't sell, and it's not if it's not going to sell, it's when it doesn't sell because the price is ridiculous.
Yep.
Having that conversation up front makes so much more sense than when you're in the midst of a situation. Okay, great. Let's move to the buy side. So a potential buyer, oh, sorry, Lisa has a question. What is your approach to these listings that are offering 2% commission? I am seeing that more and more now.
Interesting. So from a listing perspective, there's nothing we can do to get that seller to pay more. The co-op on the MLS is the co-op. However, if you do have a buyer broker agreement with your buyer and you have a request for them to make up the difference legally, that buyer can make up that difference for you.
Cool.
But it's frustrating. I totally get it. That's why us at App, we hold that line firm at that 2.5% co-op.
There's a reason why we hold that line firmly at Properties, and that's to keep our industry intact and our agents and our services valuable, and not dilute the industry. Allison says, what are your tips for winning in multiple offer situations?
We'll kind of get to that, I think, like in the last in the last question. So yeah,
all right,
that's coming. You're ahead of the
let's
game,
go to the let's go to the last question. Current buyer who has lost out on a few properties and is feeling deflated and wants to wait to buy until there's more inventory.
I completely understand this. This has been a bit of a frustrating process. Obviously, the inventory is low. So how about we do this? How about we take a little bit of a break, take a couple of weeks off, and we can go ahead and we can regroup. And in those 2 weeks, I'm going to look at all the offers that we made. I'm going to look at a few ways and try and be a little bit creative to see what we can do to put ourselves in a better position to win the next one. And I think what's important in this scenario, as you're talking to that buyer, is you don't want to go ahead and push them. If you try and push them and you say, oh no, you got to stay in the market, you got to stay in the market, they're going to kind of quiver back into their corner. So you do want to lean into it, give them a little bit of breathing room, and then go ahead and regroup with some sort of a plan. And whether it's a new creative idea, whatever the case may be, you want to go ahead and bring them some options, and don't just start tossing options at them right away. You want to make it look like you truly put some time, some effort, some thought into it during that week or 2 weeks. And of course, you gave them some breathing room so they don't feel like they're being pressured to move forward at that point in time.
Yeah, I love that. And some of those options can be, and I like waiting on giving the options until they've had the breathing room to de-stress. But some of those options can be like, maybe we're going to expand their search boundaries, right? Maybe they were married to a certain neighborhood and they really are losing out on finding a place there, but maybe the neighborhood that's next to it is not so bad. So maybe expanding their search parameters or their pricing or some creative financing options, right? Like using rates, one of their loan programs. So there's definitely a lot of things you can come back with.
What I like doing in this scenario, and what I've advised to some of my brokers who have gone through it, is to let's treat this like that first meeting again. So after 2 weeks, when it comes time to speak with your client again, let's sit down. Let's treat it almost like that initial buyer consultation, and let's start back from the beginning. And because at that point, some of the preferences may have changed. Like Angela said, we might be able to go ahead and expand and look at different areas. But that's a great way just to go ahead and reset the buyer's mind and also get them excited again, right? Because you can kind of use that opportunity to maybe wipe from their memory some of the negative losses of the multiple offer experiences and saying, hey, you know what, we're going to reset, let's start this again and take it from there.
And also, again, telling a story, tell a story of a similar situation you had with a buyer and how it was hard for them and what they went through and where they're at now and how it ended up being a success. And I always tell people that are losing out on, multiple offers or losing out on houses. I went through this myself when I bought the house I'm in right now years ago, but I always tell people what's meant to be will be, right? Like you may not see that now. There's a reason why you didn't get that house. And you just have to trust it and you have to lean into it that it wasn't the right scenario for you. Your time will come and the house that is meant for you will come. And you'll understand what I'm saying when it happens. And then when it happens, you have to remind them that you said that.
Yep.
Just, and it's just validating to trust you throughout the process. So one other scenario that I think is very applicable in today's market is a buyer who believes that the interest rates are way too high right now and that they are going to wait to buy. What do we say to that, Paul?
I think the first question is, what interest rate are you going to be comfortable with? What interest rate are you happy with? And I think we need to dig down and figure out what that rate actually is. And then we'll know if that rate is actually realistic or if it's not. And 9 times out of 10, they will not have an exact rate for you. They will just say, oh, rates are just a bit too high. And that allows you then to go into the next conversation and talking about all the different benefits of buying now versus of buying when rates come down, right? So if rates come down and you wait to buy until that time, you are going to be going up against other competition. Because if you are having that feeling right now that rates are too high, so you're thinking of holding off, there are other buyers who may be doing the same thing. So when rates come down, they're all going to go ahead and flood into the market. And that can very easily go ahead and push prices up. All right. And it's going to make the buyer landscape so much more competitive. The other thing I would encourage all of you to do, who have buyers who are currently renting, is to do the math for them on how much money is not getting paid towards principal. All right. And that's a huge one. At the end of the day, like over a 1 year period, they decided to wait 1 year to go ahead and buy. Right, they may have lost the ability to put $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 from that mortgage payment towards principal in that first year. Which means if they wait, they're already going to be $5K, $10K, or $15K behind. And the one thing I like about doing that is that's real money. It's something that you can actually quantify. You can go ahead and you can pull up an amortization calculator on Google, and you can do the exact math to see exactly what they're losing each month. And that's not being pushy. It's just giving them the information to make a completely informed decision.
I really love that. I love that strategy. And it is quantifiable, right?
It is. I did that for myself when we were buying a year and a half ago. We had rented for a few years, and it was so convenient, and I didn't have to worry about a thing. And I hit the reverse amortization calculator and figured, all right, if we wait one more year, here's how much money I'm going to be out. And it was a very large sum. And sometimes just looking at the figures helps.
Yeah, it's like making them look at it from a different perspective. And I love how you asked the person, what rate would you be comfortable with? And I bet most of the people are not going to have a number in mind. It's just everybody says rates are so high. So I'm just going to have this opinion too.
Yep.
One other thing, and Lisa put this in the chat, which I am a huge advocate of. She said she's been using historical data. I am a huge advocate of telling them or even showing them what the rates have been in the past, to really level set that these are not terrible rates. A few months ago, I posted a really nice graphic that Proper Rate gave us that actually shows what the interest rates were by decade. If you guys need that again, I'm happy to send that graphic to you. It really is something great that I would probably pull out when I needed it during a conversation where someone was saying the interest rates were too high. I would pull out that graphic and I would show them, look at what the rates have been historically. These rates really aren't that terrible. Katrina says, yes, please. Okay, I will make a note to post that again. But use it, guys, because anything you can use as leverage to get these, buyers, level setting with them as well, I think helps too. Okay, awesome. Any other questions for Paul before I get into our homework? All right, so homework, we are going to create a list of common seller and buyer objections that you have faced recently, and then write out your responses to them. And you'll share those in your accountability group meetings next week on 8/23. And of course, remember to continue to write your 2 note cards and make your 5 calls each weekday. And remember to update your CRM. Who here is sick of hearing me reminding you to prospect? I'm like sick of saying it, but me and Paul were talking about this. And when Paul gives us 1 minute of his words of wisdom, hopefully you'll mention prospecting, Paul. Next meeting, you're going to have your accountability group meeting next Wednesday. I will post the agenda and the follow-up items in the app after this webinar. And remember, there's no programming on Wednesday, August 30th due to the holiday. Paul, 1 minute, words of wisdom.
All right, it is going to be prospecting. It's going to be staying in front of every single person, all your A's, all your B's, reaching out, having conversations with them. Even the ones that you think might not be making a move for a year, 2 years, 3 years, it doesn't matter. We never know when the market might shift. We never know when the mindset of our database people might shift. We never know when they may have a life event. We need to be as close to them as possible. So I want you to make sure you continue to prospect. And remember, when you are prospecting and you're reaching out to people in your database, it's not just trying to get them to do something, right? That's not necessarily the main goal. It's to get referrals from them, right? Because everybody knows somebody who is looking to make a move. So when you're prospecting, it's not just pulling them and saying, hey, it's time for you to make a move. All right, it's keeping that connection there. So you are top of mind, so they refer you to somebody else who is looking to make a move.
Awesome. Love it. Paul, thank you so much for being here with us today. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will make sure to post the follow-up items in the app. I'm also going to send you a handy dandy script that I had created from last year's Accelerate program that I think would help you guys too. So Paul, thank you again. Everybody make it a great week. And if I don't see here or talk to you before Labor Day, have a great Labor Day weekend, and we'll see you live again that next Wednesday. Take care, guys. Thanks, Paul.
Everybody.